Everybody, JJ here. You're watching Bull, Boom, Bear, Bust. Back with another dose of economic reality. We've got a lot to talk about. The news today, the GDP number, everybody's talking about it in the business world. It's supposedly good news. But here's the bad news with the good news. The bad news is that the Fed is going to look at this as a positive sign for the economy. And that's going to make them more dedicated to rate hikes, right? So that's why we say bad news is actually, or good news is actually bad news. Now, as far as the news, the GDP number 2.6%, third quarter GDP, better than expected. First of all, how much of this was consumer spending? Even CNBC is pointing out a narrowing trade deficit and increases in consumer spending and government outlays boosted the number. So the fact that everything costs more, does anyone think that that might contribute to more spending, right? So inflation now is helping the GDP number because GDP number is largely based on spending and also government outlays. What about all the weapons we've been shipping overseas to other countries? Does that help GDP? Yes, it does. It's factored in there. So this narrative that this is somehow meaning the economy's changing or going to get better for people, I don't know how anyone can come to that conclusion, but you look at the mainstream news channels, the business channels. I was watching some of it earlier. Everybody's all upbeat, and we should all be out buying stocks and investing, and everybody should be happy and no concerns, and not preparing for things to get worse. Well, first of all, we have a double-digit inflation number. If you look at the real number, GDP at 2.6%, inflation still double digits and beyond. So does that seem like good news to anyone here? Also, is this a GDP number that they're putting up on the screen, is this helping your budget? Is it helping your wallet? Or are most people still being creamed by inflation? Well, if you look at the numbers, if you look at the data, the surveys that we pointed out here over the past several months and years, but even more recently here, 65 to 75% of the consumers, the people surveyed, are saying that they're worse off today than they were before the health crisis, just going back a little over 2 years ago. So that should tell you what's really happening. So now also, when it comes to the direction of the economy, we even saw the previous two quarters that had negative GDP growth. Those were basically ignored, and they still wouldn't admit that there was a recession. So the fact that this third quarter, the most recent quarter, is better than expected, does it really mean anything when they've already changed the definition of recession? So do you think they're going to let a negative GDP number come out shortly before November? And we all know what's happening in November. And that's another thing. I've been getting a lot more messages and emails lately. Hey, JJ, who do you support? Who do you want to win? To me, it makes this much difference. Zero. It's going to be choosing worse versus bad, or who's less worse is what it is, right? Nobody has any solutions. There's one party, when the previous president was in power, he didn't want interest rates to rise. So if we still had that president, the bubbles would be even bigger right now. Homelessness would likely be even worse. And, you can argue that point. Sorry, pretty noisy plane there. Actually, not too far from an airport. That was actually a medical helicopter, though. Anyways, when you look at home affordability, homes now, even though prices have come down in many areas, affordability now is even much worse. Homes are about 50% higher when you look at the payments. So the people buying right now, the cash buyers buying right now, are going to be the ones in a better position. And I know that sounds strange because prices could go down even more. But when you look at the payments, people that don't have a big down payment and they're financing most of the home, let's say people with just a 3 or 5% down payment, even a 20% down payment, your payments are still going to be much higher now, even with lower home prices, because of the higher mortgage rates. And I think even people that are buying now thinking they're getting a great deal because they saw the price 6 months ago was much higher, they're thinking they're going to get a good deal now, or are getting a good deal. They're going to be severely disappointed when they see what happens, especially in the coming 6 to 12 months. We're going to see probably the biggest chunk of the home price correction here in the next 6 to 12 months. Unless the Fed comes out and reverses course, even if they do, it's going to be difficult to bring the housing market back, in my opinion. Next, let's talk about the major crash. The Metaverse, formerly known as Facebook, down about 70% from the peak. We're talking about the stock price. Um, Zuck and company in a big chunk of their focus was on this Metaverse, and I guess they want everybody in this alternate reality and walking around with goggles on because maybe they don't want people to see what's happening in the real world, you know. But did anyone think that this was going to be a big thing where people were going to want to live in the metaverse or spend much time in the metaverse? People are already buried in their phones and their tablets, glued to their screens for the most part. And to think people have more time to go put on some goggles and hang out in the metaverse. When people are working two jobs and working a full-time job with two side hustles, how much time do people have to hang out in the metaverse, right? People are already living in an alternate reality when you look at their beliefs and what they think is really happening. Right? There's so many people out there that think actually the economy is doing good and they believe these numbers that come out. And back to the GDP number, so we're supposed to believe that GDP number on top of everything else we talked about. We just are supposed to believe that GDP number while we've unraveled and revealed here that the unemployment numbers are fake. It doesn't count the 100+ million people out of the labor force. The inflation numbers are fake when you look at shadow stats and when you look at just yourself, look at your budget and your household expenditures and personal expenditures. Are you only spending 7 or 8% more than you were last year? Well, I think it's more for everybody. Look at home prices, look at rents, look at just fuel. Just those three things already debunk the whole 7, 8% inflation number that we've been fed. And it's just going to continue. And I expect the second 2 months of the year to be really, really attention grabbing. And I think after early November, we're going to start to see a lot of news come out that shows us. We've already seen the news over the past couple of years, but even more noticeable. Even more noticeable. I saw a story this morning about a woman living in her car. She had a college degree, and she's here in San Diego living out of her car. The story didn't say, this was just a local news station. The story didn't say if she, what degree she had and if she had student loan debt. But my guess is it's somebody that has a degree, has probably a lot of student loan debt. And look where it got her. She's living in her vehicle. I guess one good point is it doesn't get too cold out here in San Diego. So people that do have to go live in tents or in their vehicles, I guess there's not much better weather to live in your tent or live in your vehicle in. Hopefully you can afford to turn on your vehicle and turn on the heat when it gets cold at night. But that's just another example. There's probably millions of similar people out there that are living with relatives, living with roommates because they can't afford rent, living in a tent, living in their vans, in their vehicles. This particular person that the story was about was actually living out of her SUV, and thank goodness she didn't have any kids. Can you imagine having kids and living in a vehicle or anywhere else besides a home? A tent, a van, even an RV would be very, very difficult. Now, with the cost of fuel, the cost of campgrounds going up, more people living in vans and RVs are having a more difficult time to find a place to park it, to hook up utilities, and it's bad across the board. So believe what you will about the GDP number. Let me know down in the comments, please. Are you changing your outlook because of this GDP number? Are you going to go out and just rush into the stock market now because everything's looking good? Or is it pretty much a sham number like a lot of the other economic numbers that come out? And is it based on the fact that it went up? Is it based on consumer spending more for so many products that boosts the GDP? That's what I think. Please let me know down in the comments what you think. We're going to wrap this one up, everybody. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.